U.S. Army and Marine Corps MRAPs Mine-Resistant Ambush-Protected Vehicles. Mine-Resistant Ambush-Protected Vehicle MRAP is the newest land warfare system in the United States Army and Marine Corps inventory, designed to meet the challenges of operating in a counterinsurgency. The MRAP has taken survivability to a new level, and like other vehicles in the U.S. inventory, the MRAP does not have a common vehicle design. There are several vendors, each with their own unique platform. Base Systems, Navistar International, Force Protection Inc., Oshkosh, and other defense automotive companies have produced MRAPs for the U.S. military. Each of these companies manufactured the MRAP according to one of three classifications set by U.S. Department of Defense: Category I, Category, and Category 3. The Category I vehicles are the smallest and lightest of the MRAP family. They are officially referred to as the Mine-Resistant Utility Vehicle MRUV variant and are designed primarily for urban operations. Category 2 covers the MRAPs designed for convoy security, medical evacuation, and explosive ordnance disposal. The Category 3 MRAP, whose only example is the Buffalo MRV, performs the same function as Category 2 but is designed to carry more personnel. Since their introduction in 2005-07, MRAPs have performed remarkably well in the asymmetric warfare environment. Their unique design and survivability characteristics have saved hundreds of lives, which otherwise would have been lost to landmines or AD attacks. Although manufactured by different companies, nearly all MRAPs have the same features. They are equipped with a V-shaped hull to deflect the blast from an explosive away from the vehicle and also have a higher ground clearance to dissipate the impact from any mine blast. Although the Americans did not field the MRAP until the latter years of the Iraq War, the vehicle itself was nothing new. Years earlier, the South Africans had pioneered the MRAP during the Rhodesian Bush War 1972-80 and the South African Border War 1966-89. Under the banner of the Affalant Manufacturing Company, which has been owned, at various times, by Reunert, Vickers, Alvis, and currently by the South African military created the first line of mine-resistant vehicles. These models included the Okapi, Mambo, and Caspar MRV, some of which became the basis for American MRAP designs. History and development. In June 2003, 3 months after the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, the improvised explosive device IED emerged as the enemy's weapon of choice. By December of that year, the IED was responsible for over half of all U.S. combat deaths, and it was soon declared the #1 threat to coalition forces. The appearance of the IED caught U.S. policymakers and DoD officials by surprise. In the opening days of the Iraq War, many anticipated that the operation would be an easy victory and that American troops would return home within the year. According to Christopher J. Lamb, Matthew J. Schmidt, and Barrett G. Fitzsimmons in their book, MRAPs, Irregular Warfare, and Pentagon Reform, this predisposition meant that post-conflict reconstruction stabilization operations received little attention, as did the possibility of extended civil disturbances or sustained irregular warfare. As a result, U.S. forces trained for high-intensity warfare suddenly confronted problems with which they had no previous experience. In fact, the U.S. military had no trained for irregular warfare or counterinsurgency operations since the Vietnam War. Furthermore, there was no vehicle platform suited for the complexities of the counterinsurgency environment. As IED attacks were on the rise, field commanders and DoD officials realized that the problem required a multifaceted solution. The most obvious answer was to field a better armored vehicle, but none were readily available. The U.S. Army and Marine Corps had a sizable fleet of M1 Abrams tanks, but the senior leaders of either service were reluctant to commit their tanks en masse to the counterinsurgency fight. Indeed, during the early days of the 6 IED menace, the most immediate option was the up-armored Humvee. However, by the time U.S. forces invaded Iraq, only 2% of the Army's 110,000 Humvees were armored. To make matters worse, the Pentagon had paid so little attention to the whereabouts of their up-armored Humvees that they had difficulty locating all of them. As it turned out, the up-armored variants had been scattered across various installations with no rhyme or reason to their placement. 70 of these Humvees were, in fact, found at a missile base in North Dakota. Yet even as the military scoured its bases for up-armored Humvees, it was clear that there were not enough on hand to meet the operational requirement in Iraq. In response, the Army began working with manufacturers to increase production of the armored Humvee to replace its soft-skinned versions. Under these circumstances, production of the armored variant increased from 51 units per month in August 2003 to 400 vehicles per month in September 2004 and finally to 550 vehicles per month by the end of 2005. Almost simultaneously, the Army approved the emergency shipping of thousands of add-on armor kits for the existing fleet of Humvees already in theater. Another solution found during the first year of the Iraq War was to rush further M1117 Armored Security Vehicles ASVs to Iraq. A military police vehicle, the ASV was in danger of being terminated from the 2004 defense budget until Congress saved the program. Although the ASV was significantly lighter and less armored than the MRAPs that were eventually fielded, the ASV offered similar protection against mines and other ambushes. Early on, commanders in the field recognized the ASV's utility in protecting their convoys and patrols. Despite these developments, however, the IED threat continued to grow. The first IEDs were little more than simple explosives that the enemy would throw under moving vehicles. Nevertheless, they soon evolved into roadside bombs that could be remotely detonated by a cell phone or a garage door opener. As the armored Humvee began to pour into theater, insurgents began targeting the soft underbellies. They were soon burying IEDs in the road and packing them with as many as 100 pounds of explosives. Another form of IED, and perhaps the most deadly, was the explosively formed penetrator EFP, which was able to better penetrate armor, and in doing so, spray elements of the weapons and the vehicle armor into the vehicle's interior. Although they were intended to mitigate the IED threat, the armored Hums, add-on kits, and ASVs were not the best solution. The delivery of all three was beset by monetary and logistical problems. By fall 2004, the U.S. Army had slightly more than half of its quota for the armored Humvee. Even worse, the weight of the add-on kits made the original Hums difficult to maneuver and ruined their suspensions. As other units waited to receive their add-on kits, they improvised by placing scrap metal, plywood, ballistic glass, and sandbags on their vehicles to increase protection. By January 2005, it was clear that U.S. troops needed a more heavily armored and specifically tailored vehicle to counter the IED threat. The following month, Marine Brigadier General D.J. Hedgelich, Deputy Commander of the 2 Marine Expeditionary Force, submitted his urgent universal needs statement to the Pentagon. Within its pages, Hedgelich made a forceful case for the MRAP. There is an immediate need for an MRAP vehicle capability to increase the survivability and mobility of Marines operating in a hazardous fire against known threats. The expanded use of IED, RPG and small arms fire SAF in the area of operations requires a more robust family of vehicles, capable of surviving the IED RPG SAF threat as we operate throughout these areas. Marines are expected to respond rapidly and without a large security contingent. Therefore, we need a vehicle that allows us to survive the first blow and then counterattack. Our combined ground forces are acutely exposed to the IED RPG SAF threat as they continue to prosecute offensive operations and security and stability operations. This need was identified through operational combat experience and critical analysis of casualty data from the Joint Theater Trauma Registrar Report JTTR. JTTR for October 2004 indicates IEDs are number 1. Mechanisms of injury. MRAP designed vehicles represent a significant increase in their survivability baseline over existing motor vehicle equipment and will mitigate casualties resulting from IEDs. Operational experience to task current and anticipated missions in theater are better supported by a family of MRAP vehicles. The MEF Marine Expeditionary Force cannot continue to lose personnel and equipment to IED and MV at current rates when a commercial off-the-shelf capability exists to mitigate these threats. The current fleet of ground vehicles is constantly exposed to IED RPG threats while conducting active combat, combat support, and combat service. Support as well as the inherent dangers that accrue to vehicles conducting linear and long-haul missions over the open roads. Operating forces, service components, and supporting establishments have come together to modify and enhance vehicle protection. The MRAP would provide the operating force with a modular and scalable system capable of increasing the level of protection in accordance with the type of weapons available to the enemy. The MRAP will mitigate or eliminate the three primary kill mechanisms of mines and IEDs: fragmentation, blast overpressure, and acceleration. It will also counter the secondary kill mechanisms of vehicle crashes following mine strikes and fire aboard vehicles. The MRAP vehicle capability will help establish a baseline survivability index that will increase protection and reduce the number of casualties requiring medical treatment in a given theater of operations. General Hedgelich went on to say that proposed family of MRAP vehicles should include a multi-role utility platform, i.e. gun truck, an ambulance variant, a command and control vehicle, a troop transport, a cargo hauler, and an upgraded version of the existing Buffalo mine removal vehicles. In the same universal urgent needs statement, Hedgelich forecasted that the vehicle would need a monocoque hull, meaning that the body and chassis would form a single unit, thereby eliminating the need of an internal frame or truss. He then outlined 14 critical requirements that the MRAP would need to be effective in combat war. The MRAP had to withstand a blast from at least 30 pounds of explosive under the wheel and at least 15 pounds underneath the exposed hull. The outer skin had to protect the crew from 7.62 mm gunfire at a range of at least 30 meters. This requirement was based on the studied patterns of Iraqi insurgents' small arms tactics. Our protection from overhead airbursts or side blasts from 155 mm shell. In the early days of the IED threat, the insurgents had become quite adept at rigging 155 mm artillery rounds to command detonators. Ideally, the MRAP would also have the capability to protect the crew from gas agents or other biological radiological weaponry. Rifle firing ports to allow passenger riflemen to engage the enemy. The MRAP had to accommodate a remote firing system from the gunner station. Easily repairable and equipped with modular parts that could facilitate a plug-and-play maintenance and service plan. A high-grade safety harness for each crew member seat. Hedgelich recommend harnesses based on the models found in the UH-60 family of helicopters, i.e. Black Hawk, Seahawk, etc., featuring an ergonomic easing and a quick-release function. The seat cushions would also have to be of an aircraft quality. Cruciating had to be shock-absorbent, multi-positional with emphasis on ability to fight effectively, outward field of vision to facilitate rapid weapons employment, and be fully removable based on mission requirements. Rated to withstand a 360 rollover with no significant damage to the vehicle's structure or onboard instrumentation. Be equipped with air conditioning and heat control. Have the ability to receive scalable, add-on armor for enhanced protection. Adequate cargo space and anchored storage boxes to minimize the risk of secondary projectiles, which would come from the upward force of a mine attack or the centrifugal force of a rollover. Have an onboard fire suppression system in the cab and crew compartments. Finally, after authorization from the U.S. Secretary of Defense (SecDef) and the Pentagon Joint Requirements Oversight Council (JROC), the organization responsible for validating the military's requirements, the Mine-Resistant Ambush Protected Vehicle program went forward. But even before the MRAP program won approval from the SecDef and JROC, American ground forces had procured a small number of existing MRAPs as early as fall of 2003. These limited quantities, coming mostly from South African channels, trickled into theater over the next 4 years and began arriving en masse once Congress and the American defense establishment sanctioned the MRAP program. Early in the MRAP's development, defense planners determined that there had to be different categories of MRAPs to handle different missions. Category I MRAPs were the smallest and lightest of the family and designed for rapid speed, maneuverability, and protracted urban combat. Described as fireteam-size vehicles, they were capable of holding up to 6 occupants, including the driver, gunner, and vehicle commander. Their primary purpose was to serve as armored personnel carriers or gun trucks employing medium or heavy caliber machine guns. Category I MRAPs could also be used by reconnaissance units for long-range surveillance and target acquisition. Every MRAP had to provide crew protection and mobile firepower, but some variants had to be modified for missions that fell beyond the realm of direct enemy engagement. Combat medics, sappers, and bomb squads needed a platform suitable for their mission sets. Hence, the concept for the Category 2 MRAP was born. The U.S. Army described the archetypal Category 2 MRAP as a squad-sized vehicle capable of holding up to 10 occupants, including the driver, gunner, and vehicle commander. Category 2 MRAPs were arguably the most versatile of the family. This multi-mission vehicle filled the roles of convoy security, medical evacuation, explosive ordnance disposal, battlefield command posts, combat engineering, cargo transport, protected personnel, transport, and traffic control operations. During their service in the Iraq War, Category 2 MRAPs were often used by rifle and sapper squads as quick reaction force vehicles. On July 31, 2007, Marine Corps Systems Command began a pre-solicitation to MRAP vendors for a Category 2 prototype. Over the ensuing year, several Category 2 MRAPs made their debut in the War on Terror. These include EB's RG-33L and Cayman 6x6, Force Protection Inc.'s Cougar 6x6, Navistar and Retenal Max Pro XL variant, and the by General Dynamics jointly produced RG-31A. Finally, Category 3 MRAPs were devised for mine detection and roadside bomb removal. However, the only MRAP procured under Category 3 was the Buffalo removal vehicle, which was already in service with frontline units at start of the MRAP program. Because the MRAPs had to fill various roles and had to be delivered quickly, the Pentagon decided not to rely on only one vendor. The first contenders' fourth MRAP program were BAE Systems, Force Protection Inc., General Dynamics Lands, YSTMS, DNERL Purpose Vehicles GPV, Navistar International Military Group, Oshkosh Truck, Protected Vehicles Inc., Textron Marine and Land Systems, Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, Land Systems OMC, the South African component of BAE, and Armor Holdings, later bought out by BAE. In July 2007, the call for an MRAP vehicle brought several companies to the drawing board. Some, like BAE and Textron, were already powerhouses in the defense industry. Others, like GPV and Protected Vehicles Inc., known for their construction vehicles and armored trucks, sought to make their debut in the coterie of defense contractors. Rafael Advanced Defense Systems and Land Systems Inc. were among the few foreign companies submitting bids for the MRAP. Rafael, one of Israel's premier defense contractors, had been producing arms for the Israeli Defense Forces since the 1950s. Their design for the MRAP competition was the experimental Golan armored vehicle. A 4x4 chassis weighing 15 tons, the Golan could accommodate 10 soldiers and protect the crew from landmines weighing up to 14 kilograms. The V-shaped hull was a monocoque configuration. This enabled Rafael to dedicate nearly 50% of the vehicle's weight to armor protection. This, in turn, allowed Golan to be fitted with add-on armor slats. The slats' highest level of protection included a reactive armor that proved remarkably effective in nearly tests against EFP mines and IEDs. The Marine Corps ordered some 60 units of the Golan, but quickly discontinued them from service. Rafael was then dropped from the MRAP competition. BAE's Land Systems OMC entered the game with recycled versions of the same lineup they had fielded to the South African Army for years. Leading the OMC lineup was the RG-31 Nyla, a new design based on the company's successful Mamba APC. The Mamba, the 4x4, 12-crew, mine-resistant vehicle, was built on a German Unimog chassis and powered by a Mercedes-Benz 352 diesel engine. It had been in service with the South African Army since 1995 and had become the vehicle of choice within several UN peacekeeping forces. For the RG-31 variant, Land Systems OMC improved the vehicle suspension and ballistic rating, and introduced an all-steel, B-shaped, monocoque hull. After OMC won a series of contracts to produce the RG-31 for American ground forces, the company introduced the RG-33, similar in appearance to THRD-31 but nearly twice the size. Looking by in the market for Category I MRAPs, Land Systems unveiled a 6x6 variant, THERG-33L, for Category 2. Meanwhile, Navistar International in their Max Pro variant. It was among the largest of the initial MRAP designs, especially for a 4x4. During their first year of producing MRAPs, Navistar International created Max Pros for both Category I and Category 2 specifications. The Category 2 design, known simply as the Max Pro XL, carried many of the same features as the Category I Max Pro but had a higher performing engine and an increased payload capacity. In May 2007, Marine Corps Systems Command ordered 1,200 Max Pros at the cost of $623 million. This was soon followed by another order for 16 Max Pro XLS in June 2007. That same month, the U.S. Army ordered an additional 755 Category MRAPs. Per the Army's request, Textron happily filled more orders for their M1117 ASV. The Marines, however, were not as impressed with the M1117 and removed Textron from their list of contractors. Oshkosh developed a Category 1 prototype known as the MRAP Alpha. Marine Corps Systems Command placed an order for 100 of these vehicles, but eliminated Oshkosh from the competition on June 29, 2007, stating that they had grave concerns regarding overall vehicle survivability, as well as ergonomic issues and authoritative deficiencies. Oshkosh then tried to develop an MRAP for the Category 2 bids. In a joint effort with the French company Thales, Oshkosh unveiled the Bushmaster IMV. Initial tests looked promising. But again, the vehicle was dropped from consideration after numerous flaws were discovered. In 2009, however, Oshkosh returned to the MRAP program with the MRAP All-Terrain Vehicle MATV. As the United States began to draw down its forces in Iraq and send more troops into Afghanistan, it was clear to U.S. policymakers that their ground troops needed MRAP that could operate in more than just urban environments. With a smaller frame and a lower center of gravity than any of its predecessors, the MATV finally won Oshkosh's spot on the MRAP team. GPV entered the competition with a model known as the Sergeant 4x4. Based on the Ford F750 chassis, the Sergeant 4x4 was popular among law enforcement agencies as a SWAT and rescue vehicle. Although driven by a powerful Caterpillar turbo diesel, the Sergeant was eliminated early in the competition. GPV also contested a Category 2 variant known as the Commander, but it too was dropped from the stakes. PVI produced a number of prototypes during the first year of the MRAP competition, none of which made the final cut. Among the earliest PVI designs was the Bulldog, a Category I entry with a 4x4 chassis. The Bulldog had an 8-crew seating capacity and was designed to serve the needs of diplomatic, VIP, and other security-related agencies in high-risk areas where traditional vehicles, such as SUP armored Chevrolet Suburbans, were no longer adequate to meet the civilians' protective needs. PVI also submitted a design called the Argus, which looked remarkably similar to the Max Pro, and another prototype known as Ridgeback, a contender for the Category 2 program. PVI rounded out its first string of prototypes with the Protector and the Beast. The Protector was designed to counter the deadly nuisance of EFPs, while the Beast was a mine removal vehicle, similar in function to the Buffalo MRV. Sadly, Ford dropped out of the competition amidst financial trouble and closed its doors in December 2007. Meanwhile, BAE also introduced the Cayman. Available in a Category 1 4x4 and a Category 2 6x6 configuration, the Cayman would become BAE's signature vehicle. Force Protection Inc. entered the fray with the Cougar and Buffalo MRV. Of the two, the Buffalo was the only vehicle that predated the MRAP program and even the War on Terror. The Buffalo was based on Denel Mecham Lion II. The Lion II was a South African mine-protected personal carrier inspired by OMC's Casper Mk2. In the late 1970s, the South African Council for Scientific and Industrial Research designed the Casper with the goal of creating a highly maneuverable armored vehicle with passive mine defense technologies. This led researchers to develop the distinctive V-shaped hull mounted atop a wheeled chassis. Debuting in 1981, the Casper is widely regarded as the world's first mine-resistant vehicle. IMC took over production in the mid-1980s and continued fielding the vehicle into the 2000s. The Buffalo, of course, found its way into the MRAP program as the only Category 3 vehicle. The U.S. Army had acquired the Buffalo in 2000 as part of the Ground Standoff Mine Detection System Gustametz program. The Buffalo came equipped with a long, robotic arm operated from inside the vehicle, which could pick up and examine suspicious objects from a distance of about 7 meters. The Cougar, like the Cayman, was offered as a 4x4 and 6x6, respectively, designed under Category I and Category 2 specifications. Inspired by a combination of earlier designs from the British, Rhodesian, and South African forces, the Cougar won a surprising number of orders during the opening months of the MRAP evaluation. At around the same time, Force Protection also introduced the Cheetah, the smallest vehicle in their lineup and based primarily on BAE's RG-31 design. Although it was ideally suited for urban combat and urban reconnaissance, Force Protection submitted it for consideration under the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle Program, a project to find a replacement for the military's aging fleet of Humvees, but it was ultimately rejected. Force Protection resubmitted the Cheetah for the MATV competition, but was edged out by the Oshkosh design. Between 2007 and 2008, only 13 prototypes of the Cheetah were built and, to this day, it has not been procured by any nation's military. Once they arrived in theater, the MRAPs made a significant impact. The first en masse vehicle deliveries took place in the fall of 2007. By the end of that year, JROC had approved the acquisition and fielding of over 15,000 MRAP variants, with full integration expected by the fall of 2009. From these modest beginnings, the number of MRAPs in service grew exponentially from 1,500 in November 2007 to over 10,000 by December 2008, the largest and most rapid fielding of any combat vehicle since World War II. Although EAD attacks were on the decline by the time the platform was fielded, the MRAP still saved numerous lives. Statistically, the casualty rate for personnel in MRAPs was less than 6%, compared to 22% for those in the armored Humvee. Then Brigadier General Lawrence Nicholson, Deputy Commander of the Marine Corps Combat Development Command, said, "I've seen MRAPs taking hits that no Humvee or no Amtrak would have survived." Other statistics claim that the MRAP was up to 400% more effective than the armored Humvee in reducing injuries and deaths. As with any military vehicle, however, the various MRAPs were not without their limitations. Because of their high ground clearance, the MRAPs had a higher center of gravity, making them more susceptible to rollovers than most other combat vehicles. In fact, experience has shown that MRAPs begin to roll over once they reach a 25 angle. Nearly all MRAPs, with the exception of the MATV, have fared poorly when taken off-road. The heavy weight of the Category I and II MRAPs was an issue when crossing bridge or operating on soft soil. They have also been described as delicate vehicles with extremely sensitive handling, very undesirable characteristics for a combat vehicle. Maintenance has also been a persistent problem for the MRAP, mainly because there are several models and nearly all of them are made by different vendors. Much of the MRAP maintenance has been performed by DoD contractors. Because each MRAP requires a different set of technical knowledge and skills to maintain, DoD is still devising a long-term maintenance strategy so that an adequate number of military personnel will be able to fill the various maintenance roles. Despite these drawbacks, however, the MRAP has performed remarkably well in Iraq and Afghanistan and has saved hundreds of American lives from the ominous threat of the IED. The pre-MRAP M1117 Armored Security-Vehicle ASV during the first year of the Iraq War, the M1117 ASV was the only mine-resistant platform readily available to U.S. forces. Yet, ironically, this program was almost cancelled in 2004. Developed in 1998 by Textron, this was based on the chassis of the V-100 Commando security vehicle, which had been used extensively by American forces in Vietnam. The M1117 remained one of the lesser-known vehicles in the U.S. Army until the Iraq War in 2003. The idea for the ASV was conceived around the same time as the M116 Stryker vehicle, the centerpiece of Army transformation. According to senior military officials, American warfare since the end of the Gulf War had shifted almost exclusively to peacekeeping and contingency-style operations. Thus, with the changing nature of warfare and the elevation in asymmetric conflicts, Textron proclaimed that a combat vehicle's survivability, mobility, and deployability are paramount. According to Textron, the ASV fills the capability gap that existed between larger armored systems and smaller bolt-on armor type of vehicles. This realization fit nicely into the Army's long-term strategic plan to transform itself into a lighter, leaner, and more agile force that could successfully engage the enemy across the spectrum of combat environments. The ASV was initially developed for implementation into the Heavy Military Police Company. Under this configuration, the Military Police Company would have a total of 15 ASVs, 3 vehicles within each off for platoons and 3 vehicles in the company headquarters section. The ASV was fielded to supplement the roles traditionally performed by military police units: mounted protection, convoy escort, route reconnaissance, mobile surveillance, and crowd riot control. Around this time, Textron also created a variant known as the M1200 Armored Knight, a precision targeting vehicle for field artillery operations. Beginning in 1998-99, a total of 94 ASVs were slated for production under Textron's $149.5 million contract. Despite this projection, however, only 53 ASVs had been delivered by 2003. The first unit to receive them was 708th Military Police Battalion, part of the U.S. Army's the 5th Corps in Europe, which field-tested the vehicle extensively throughout Kosovo. The ASV was outfitted with an expandable armor package consisting of ceramic-based appliques and an enclosed turret equipped with Mk19 grenade launcher and a .50 caliber machine gun. It also carried many of the same features that later became standard on the MRAP variants, including angled armor and V-shaped hull. When the Iraq War began in 2003, the military police units equipped with the ASV were better prepared to meet the deadly challenges of the IED. Granted, not all ASVs withstood their encounters with roadside bombs, but the crew survivability rates were much higher compared to other units equipped with standard or up-armored Humvees. On one occasion, ANA survived an IED attack and returned 28 miles 45 kilometers to its base camp, notwithstanding that all four tires had been blown out. The ASV could also survive a direct hit from an RPG, but the survival of the crew depended largely upon where the projectile hit. Witnessing the success of the vehicle in combat, the Army removed its cancellation flag from the ASV program and ordered several more units off the vehicle. With its newfound funding, production of the ASV rose from one vehicle every 3 weeks to over 56 units per month. Production remained steady until the fall of 2005, when Textron's production facility located in New Orleans was badly damaged by Hurricane Katrina. The factory, nonetheless, was quickly repaired and full production resumed by November 2006. By the following year, over 1,700 ASVs were either in service or slated for production. Many of the vehicles had by then been fielded to other Army ground units or given to the Iraqi National Police. When discussion of the MRAP program began, some politicians preferred to sing the ASV rather than developing a new set of vehicles. Thus, the ASVW is also an early contender in the MRAP evaluation. However, after it failed the initial ballistics test at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, the Marine Corps decided not to purchase the vehicle. Specifically, Marine representatives were concerned about the vehicle's weight-to-protection ratio. As with any military vehicle, there is often a trade-off between protection and mobility. The ASV was significantly lighter than the other MRAP entries and, although it performed well against many mine and ambush scenarios, evaluators did not think it fared as well against 30 to 50 pounds 13.5 to 23 kilograms explosives. Although the Army did not incorporate the M1117 into its MRAP program either, they nonetheless ordered more ASVs for their military police units and convoy escort teams. In fact, from December 2006 until October 2007, the Army awarded over $54 million in contracts to Textron to produce nearly 200 ASVs until the end of that decade. Interestingly, the ASV's concept and design foreshadowed the requirements needed to produce an effective MRAP vehicle for the U.S. military. And although the ASV was never accepted into the MRAP program, it was the first non-tracked U.S. vehicle to display any effective resistance against that threat. Its enclosed turret, which gave the gunner adequate time to reload his weapon while in contact with the enemy, coupled with M36E3 day-night sight and 360 vision blocks, gave American forces a decided advantage on the nonlinear battlefield during the early days of the Iraq War. Navistar International Max Pro. By far the most widely used MRAP is the International Max Pro. Navistar International built Max Pro variants for Category I and to Max Pro XL, although the majority of those fielded have been Category 1 models. The Max Pro features a reinforced crew compartment with a V-shaped hull mounted onto an International Workstar 7000 chassis. With a composite armor shell developed by the Israeli Plazin Company, the Max Pro's armor was bolted together instead of welded. This facilitated quicker maintenance, exchange of parts, and the ability for Navistar to rapidly manufacture and field more vehicles. When International first entered the competition, it submitted only 2 prototypes for the initial round-off testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, in March 2007. Following this test, which included maneuver drills and explosives tolerance. MRAP Systems Command placed their first order for 1,200 of the Category I vehicle. Although the MaxPro was larger than any other combat vehicle in theater, the Pentagon appreciated its speed and survivability. By the end of 2007, the U.S. military had ordered a total of 4,471 MaxPros. After the initial success of its Category I model, Navistar International decided to push a Category II variant known simply as the MaxPro XL. For making the leap to Category II, the XL differs only slightly from its Category I counterpart. The XL model carries a gross vehicle weight of up to 52,000 pounds and has dual wheels at the rear to accommodate the additional tonnage. It also comes equipped with a 375 horsepower Max Force 10 engine instead of the 330 horsepower 350 used in the base model Category variant. Aside from these upgrades, the XLI is virtually identical to the Category I throughout 2008. The MaxPro was one of the few Category MRAPs still receiving fresh orders to frontline units. The MaxPro's popularity continued to grow and, in September 2008, the Marine Corps awarded a $752 million contract, the most expensive contract awarded for an MRAP at the time, to Navistar International, for a lighter and more mobile version of the MaxPro. The result was the MaxPro Dash. The Dash variant essentially took everything from the base model and scaled it down to mitigate the rollover hazard. It introduced a lower center of gravity, lower torque-to-weight ratio, and a smaller turning radius. Since its first deliveries in 2007, there have been over 7,000 MaxPro variants built, most of which have served in the Iraq War. In many ways, the MaxPro has become the flagship of the MRAP program, featuring prominently in American news stories surrounding the troop surge and drop in violence and IED attacks. Oshkosh Defense Metval of MATV was never officially classified into MRAP category. Its size and technical specifications were on the vehicle's inclusion in Category I. As the U.S. began tossing more of its ground forces into Afghanistan, it became increasingly clear that the existing fleet of MRAPs were unsuitable for off-road maneuvers or sustained operations in rough terrain. The complaints being registered about the Category I and II vehicles were nearly unanimous. They handled poorly, they couldn't go off-road, and they were too top-heavy. The MRAP program managers then issued a joint urgent operational needs statement calling for a lighter, leaner, and more agile MRAP that could perform off-road missions. On March 11, 2009, Pentagon Press Secretary Jeff Morrell said at a press conference that the MATV would be an operational stepping stone to the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle JLTV, a four-wheeled combat vehicle that would combine the agility of the Humvee with the protective capacity of the MRAP. According to defense planners, the MRAP all-terrain vehicle needed to have a gross weight of no more than 25,000 pounds 11,350 kilograms and a tare weight of no more than 17,000 pounds 7,718 kilograms. It also needed to accommodate a crew of 5, including a gunner and driver. Smaller vehicle dimensions and a narrow turning radius were also critical. Per earlier MRAP requirements, the MATV had to protect the crew from the most intense amine blasts and explosive form penetrator IEDs. The first proposals were submitted to manufacturers on January 12, 2009. 6 designs then came forward for the initial testing phase, a Cayman 4x4 variant known as the Cayman MTV, to be AMAT prototypes, the Oshkosh MATV, the International MXT, and the Cheetah from Force Protection Inc. By entered the fray in February 2009 with 2 MATV variants, which they submitted for 2 months of extensive trials. Shortly thereafter, Force Protection Inc. won a contract to deliver to Cheetah prototypes. The Cheetah vehicle, which had been in development since late 2005, passed testing to MRAP I survivability levels and had undergone initial mobility and durability testing at the U.S. Army's Nevada Automotive Test Center. International's MXTW letters first developed in 2006 and marketed as an armored utility truck deliverable by C-130. The MATV variant was screened out of the competition early, but the British Army ordered several hundred of the vehicle and rebranded it as the Husky Tactical Support Vehicle Medium. This version of the MX2 remains in service with the British Army to this day. Though Oshkosh Defense was comparatively late in submitting their MATV, it won the contract after extensive trials. On June 30, 2009, the U.S. Army ordered 2,244 MATVs, with the first deliveries made in October 2009. The Oshkosh MATV was assembled on the Medium Tactical Vehicle Replacement MTVR chassis. The MTVR was an earlier Oshkosh design sold to the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps as a replacement for the M939 Utilitrix. Fielded in 1998, the MTVR had a significant improvement in off-road maneuvering as it could carry a 7-ton payload across virtually any unimproved surface. With its proven excellence in off-road handling, Oshkosh knew they had found the basis for the all-terrain MRAP. Covering chassis was a unique armored hull designed by the Israeli manufacturer Plazin. The underbelly of the vehicle came equipped with a new TEK for independent suspension, traction control, and anti-lock brakes controlling for heavy-duty run-flat tires. Like its urban-focused predecessors, the MATV could accommodate a variety of weapons from atop its turret. These included an M240 machine gun, an M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun, Mk19 grenade launcher, or a TOW missile system. Arriving in Afghanistan, the MATV dramatically increased its survivability and mobile combat power of the American ground units. For instance, on the night of March 28, 2010, elements of B Company, 10 Battalion, 503rd Infantry 173rd Airborne Brigade were in patrol in their new MRAPs in the Kunar River Valley off Afghanistan. As the patrol funneled into a narrow passageway between Twa Mountains, it was suddenly attacked from both sides by Taliban RPG teams. At the outset of the engagement, the Taliban fighters hit the MATV with 3 consecutive RPG rounds, all of which made little more than a dent in the side of the new MRAP. Although the vehicle has quantitatively saved lives in Afghanistan, the MATV has also had its fair share of criticism. Soldiers have stated that, despite its comparative ease in off-road handling, it is still top-heavy, cramped, and prone to both engine and mechanical troubles. Taken together, these problems represent challenges that have plagued the MRAP program since its inception in 2007. While these criticisms are valid, the MATV, like its predecessors in the Iraqi theater, has done its job to provide better protection from the evolving and creative threats of the counterinsurgency environment. By Cayman 4X4 and 6X6 leading the BA family of vehicles was the Cayman. Sporting the SAMAV-shaped hull as its counterparts, the Cayman was based on the familiar medium tactical vehicles FMTV and the low-signature armored cab LSAC, both of which were produced by Stewart and Stevenson, a private manufacturing company based in Houston, Texas. The FMTV was the newest generation of utility trucks designed to replace the aging M35 2.5 and M939 5-ton trucks. LSAC, according to the manufacturer, gave ballistic and mine blast protection for the crew in a purpose-built cab that can be interchanged with a standard FMTV cab in 8 hours. The LSAC cab can provide the crew protection from assault rifle rounds, landmines, and artillery fragments and still retain C-130 transportability, and can be installed on any FMTV vehicle in the fleet. Stewart and Stevenson was acquired by Armor Holdings in 2005, which in turn was bought by BA in 2007. Recognizing the FMTV's and LSAC's adaptability to the MRAP program, BA added composite armor to create the first Cayman prototype. The Cayman completed its first trial run at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in July 2007, and the first deliveries were made to the U.S. Army later that month. Originally, the Cayman was developed as a 6x6 vehicle exclusively for the MRAP category to program. However, most of the vehicles procured from BA were equipped with Category I seating configurations and are often listed as Category I MRAPs in official U.S. Army documents. From December 2007 until March 2008, BA received orders in excess of $1.5 billion to deliver Caymans to the U.S. Army and Marine Corps. At the end of 2007, for instance, Marine Corps Systems Command placed an order for 668 Cayman vehicles, which preceded another order for 1,024 vehicles following spring. In January 2008, BA announced that it would begin developing an upgraded version of the Cayman. Under a $5.7 million contract, the DoD reserved their right to order up to 20,500 vehicles over the ensuing fiscal year. In October 2008, BA unveiled the Cayman Light, a 4x4 variant. The vehicle offered comparable reputation to the larger 6x6 vehicle, but at 18 tons, was two-thirds the weight of its predecessor. The 4x4 vehicle maintained 85% commonality in parts with the 6x6 vehicle, had the same electronic controls, and could be fitted with all-wheel steering, providing the turning radius of less 20 feet throughout its production life. The Cayman was manufactured at the Bay facilities in Fairfield, Ohio, and Sealy, Texas. The former Stewart and Stevenson plant. The V-shaped hulls would be forged in Ohio and sent to Texas for their final assembly. Production of the Cayman ended on November 20, 2008, concurrently with BAE's moratorium on the RG-33 vehicles. Although production ended in 2008, BAE has prolonged the life of the Cayman through various upgrades and strategic maintenance programs. Since the Cayman shares a remarkable commonality with the Army's Liniof FTMVs, BAE has the flexibility to address both vehicles wherever their maintenance teams are stationed. In June 2009, Marine Corps Systems Command awarded BAE another contract $19 million to upgrade its existing fleet of 1,800 Caymans. At the outset of the MATV competition, BAE developed prototypes that were based largely on the Cayman 4x4. Although BAE's entry lost to the Oshkosh design, BAE did receive a contract in September 2010 to convert 1,700 Caymans into the Cayman multi-terrain vehicle MTV. The MTV was a model introduced by Cayman earlier that year, said to provide an effective combination of interior capacity, tactical mobility, operator comfort, and survivability. Unlike BAE's earlier MRAP design, the MTV was based on the 6x6 chassis. Its upgrades included an independent suspension system designed by Arvind Meritor, an improved armored cab, a stronger chassis, and better seating. By General Dynamics RG-31. Although not as well known as the Cayman, the RG-31 Nyla and 333 have proven to be just as effective as their celebrated stablemate. Based on the Mamba APC, the RG-31 was manufactured by Land Systems Inc., the South African division of BAE. The RG-31 carries many off-features typically found on South African mine-resistant vehicles. This includes a high suspension and a monocoque hull designed to withstand simultaneous blasts from TM-57 landmines, the enemy's weapon of choice during the Border War and the Rhodesian Bush War. The RG-31 has several variants, each designated by an MK suffix. The RG-31 MK5 features four-wheel drive and theoretically is suitable for both on-road and off-road maneuvers. Like most MRAPs, the RG-31 can be modified for a variety of roles. The modular interior layout could be configured for armored personnel carrier, command and control, ambulance, scout vehicle, or other applications. The engine, transmission, and fuel cell were situated inside the armored hull for maximum protection. Shearer fenders were provided for water and equipment storage. For self-protection, the vehicle was equipped with 11 gun ports for personal weapons and a single top turret hull. On some vehicles, a remote weapon station was fitted to the top of the vehicle, further improving the crew's ability to return fire while being protected. For route clearance operations, spare tires were normally armored and additional armor added to protect their tanks and fuel lines. The RG-31 MK5E featured a few upgrades from the MK5, but the most notable difference was its longer length. The RG-31A3, also known as RG-31 MK5 Enhanced Mobility, featured a similar hull length to the standard 31 MK5, but was fitted with a more powerful 300 horsepower engine. Prior to its debut in the United States Army, the RG-31 had been used extensively by NATO and UN forces in various peacekeeping operations throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s. With a proven record of reliability, security, and effectiveness in route clearing operations, DOT acquired 9 RG-31s in 2003-04. During its inaugural year in Afghanistan, it became clear that this new mine-resistant vehicle was worth the cost. For in October 2004, 2 combat engineers assigned to Bravo Company, 367th Engineer Battalion, part of Joint Task Force 76 headquartered at Bagram Airfield, offered the following testimony. While on a vehicle patrol in southeastern Afghanistan, our vehicle suffered a possible mine strike or improvised explosive device IED attack. All 5 passengers of the vehicle were able to exit the RG-31 and run to the next vehicle in the convoy, where we were treated for minor injuries and continued to carry on with the mission. The driver, the machine gunner, and myself were taken by helicopter to the closest medical station and kept overnight for observation. After going through an ordeal like this, we feel compelled to thank company responsible for the RG-31. We also feel that we could provide some good feedback to you in regards to what, if any, changes or additions could be made to the vehicle. We hope that the U.S. Army takes into consideration how valuable the RG-31 is compared to an up-armored Humvee, and is in the process of buying more of these vehicles. We had two RG-31s in Afghanistan, now we have one. The threat of mines and IEDs is still prevalent. We are ready to go back out and do our job of finding these threats. We would just feel better equipped if we had more RG-31s. We urge your company to do whatever it takes to sell or market this and all your other protective vehicles to the U.S. Army. If needed, we can provide written testimony in regard to the RG-31. After the RG-31's delivery and initial feedback, BAE Systems partnered with General Dynamics Land Systems to supply additional units of the vehicle to the U.S. military. Under this agreement, General Dynamics would provide us program management and logistics, while BAE Land Systems South Africa would manufacture the vehicles. On February 16, 2005, the U.S. Army Program Manager for Close Combat Systems awarded the BAE General Dynamics Venture a $78 million contract including $3 million in spare parts to produce 148 unit RG-31s by 2006. Almost simultaneously, the Canadian government solicited a $60.3 million contract for 50 RG-31s to accommodate the growing number of Canadian troops deploying with NATO forces to Afghanistan. The Canadians' one stipulation, however, was that it be equipped with the Kongsberg Protector M151 remote weapon station, which would allow the vehicle's gunner to fire the main armament from inside the vehicle. M151 came equipped with day and night vision capabilities and was later retrofitted onto most American MRAPs. After the MRAP program was finally sanctioned by Congress, 2007 became the busiest year for the RG-31. That spring, General Dynamics won an $11 million contract from Marine Corps Systems Command and a $76.5 million contract from the U.S. Army Tank and Automotive Command for delivery of selected variants of. The following summer, the U.S. Army solicited 44 Mk5 variants of the RG-31 and more OROD sled armor kits to be retrofitted to the existing fleet. Contracts continued to flow through 2007 and, by year's end, the company had unveiled yet another version of the Nyla, the RG-31 Mk6. This variant featured a longer, wider hull and a more powerful engine. 33BA RG-33 and RG-33 capitalizing on the success of their RG-31 model, BAE's South African subsidiary began work on the RG-33. Developed as a close counterpart of the RG-31, BAE offered two variants of the RG-33, the Category A base model 4x4 and a Category 2. 6x6 variant known as the RG-33L. The 6x6 chassis could take on any number of battlefield roles, including infantry carrier, ambulance, command and control, convoy escort, and explosive ordnance disposal. Both variants featured the monocoque V-shaped hull and offered a more spacious cabin than previous MRAP models. By itself, the RG-33 models could withstand both 5.56 and 7.62 mm gunfire and almost any intensity of mine blasts. Also, as with many MRAP variants, the RG-33 could be retrofitted with additional armor. The vehicle was constructed in a Unimog chassis and featured on-board exportable power for the normal variety of mission equipment. To meet the protective requirements against the FP, BAE also developed the RG-33 Plus and the RG-33L Plus. Under the ambulance configuration, the RG-33L was known as the Heavy Armored Ground Ambulance HAGA. The HAGA had a unique design feature that allowed the onboard medics to care for up to 3 critical casualties in reconfigurable litter stations. When the litter stations were folded and not in use, the HAGA could accommodate up to 6 ambulatory, walking wounded patients. The HAGA also had additional storage space for medical supplies. A variant of the Category I 4x4, known as the RG-33 USACOM, was designed to the specifications of the U.S. Special Operations Command. As such, it came equipped with remote weapon station, swing arm mounts, internal seating for 8, integrated unique SOCOM equipment, and a rear door assist. The first contracts were negotiated in January 2007, when the Marine Corps placed an order for 2 4x4 variants and 2 6x6 variants. That first contingent for series production began the following month, on February 14, 2007, when BAE announced that it had negotiated a new contract for $55.4 million to deliver 15 Category 1 vehicles and 75 Category 2 vehicles to the Marines. The following June, BAE filled another order for 409 vehicles, 150 for USACOM 4x4 variants, 239 standard 6x6 variants, and 16 Haga models to be delivered by year's end. Contracts and deliveries continued over the next year and a half until production ended on November 20, 2008. Although 2008 marked the end of production, BAE still provides technical support and upgrades to the vehicle. To date, there have been 1,735 RG-33s fielded to the U.S. Army and Marine Corps. Force Protection Cougar 4X4 and Cougar 6X6. The Cougar was developed by Force Protection Inc. as a counterpart to the company's Buffalo MRV. Like the Buffalo, the Cougar predated the MRAP program and was based largely on the existing fleet of South African mine-resistant vehicles. The story of the Cougar began with the defense company Technical Solutions Group Inc. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Technical Solutions was working on a mine-resistant vehicle based on the Lion 4x4, a vehicle developed by Denel Mitchum for the South African Army. Technical Solutions was acquired by Sonic Jet Performance Inc., a company that specialized in the production of high-performance speedboats, in 2002. However, as the market for speedboats plummeted, Sonic Jet shifted its focus exclusively to the production of mine-resistant vehicles. The resultant Technical Solutions, Sonic Jet venture then renamed itself Force Protection Inc. Picking up where Technical Solutions left off, Force Protection took the concepts for the Lion-based MRAP and developed the Cougar prototype. The Cougar borrowed several elements from the 4x4 Lion variant and was given an upgraded protection package. The Cougar series of vehicles consists of a Category 1 4x4 and a Category 2 6x6 variant. Both configurations were developed in 2003 and 2004, with the first model unveiled in April 2004. Optimized for the urban and asymmetric battlefields, the Cougar offered what was then unparalleled protection for wheeled tactical vehicle. The armor package boasted an improved ballistic performance, and the monocoque frame performed very well under the intense explosive testing at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. Per its technical specs, it could withstand a direct hit from a 30-pounds blast of TNT under the both axles and a 15-pounds blast underneath the vehicle's center. The vehicle, like many of its MRAP counterparts, was scalable, i.e. it could be upgraded with add-on armor or even have its armaments removed for humanitarian missions. When configured for combat operations, the Cougar could accommodate any caliber of mounted crew-served weaponry, including the M2 Browning machine gun, the Mk19 grenade launcher, and the M240 general-purpose machine gun. It could also accommodate the Objective Gunner Protection Kit OGPK and Crow's Remote Weapon Operating System. The UG featured full wraparound protection for the gunner, while allowing him a 360 view of the battlefield from behind the shield of enhanced ballistic glass. Perhaps the most important protective features on the vehicle, however, were its reinforced shaped hull and its chemical, nuclear, biological, and radiological overpressure and filtering system. Both the Category I and Category models have been modified into different variants. Among the first towed marketed to American ground forces was the Hardened Engineer Vehicle, or Cougar He. The Cougar He was designed to meet the operational requirement of sapper and other combat engineer units. Another version of the Cougar was manufactured for the Iraqi Army. It featured the SAMA protective components as its American counterpart and was labeled the Iraq Light Armored Vehicle. A lesser-known but no less important version of Cougar was the ISS, featuring a heavy-duty shock and suspension system to allow for cross-country mobility. Modified versions of the Cougar were also sent to the British Army, where the Cougar 4x4 was renowned Ridgeback Protected Patrol Vehicle, and the 6x6 was rebranded as the Mastiff Protected Patrol Vehicle, and the Wolfhound Heavy Tactical Support Vehicle. The Category 2 Cougar was widely available as a Joint Rapid Response Vehicle JRV. The first contingent of Cougar He vehicles were given to the U.S. Marine Corps in April 2004. Under the order placed by Marine Corps Systems Command, 28 Cougar He-4x4 vehicles were purchased at the collective cost of $11.3 million. The first deliveries were made in October 2000 for Ensign to 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. After 7 months of proven combat performance, the Marine Corps placed more orders for the Cougar in May 2005. This time, Marine Corps System Command negotiated a new contract for 122 Cougar 6x6 vehicles of the JRV configuration. In 2006, nearly 280 JRVs marked for the U.S. Army and Marine Corps were purchased at a combined cost of over $190 million. Under the official MRAP program, Cougar divided its existing fleet into the predetermined series I and II. The first round of Cougar platforms procured under the MRAP program were earmarked in January 26, 2007, under DOD Contract M6785407D5031. Under this contract, only 2 of each base model Cougar were ordered, 2 4x4S and 2 6x6S. After nearly a 2-week-long ballistics test, the Army ordered 65 Category 1 Cougars and 60 Category 2 Cougars at a combined price of $67.4 million. The largest number of orders on a single contract came on April 23, 2007, when 300 Category I-4x4 South and 700 Category 2 6x6 were purchased by DoD. Additional orders through 2009 added a total of 1,530 Category I vehicles and 1,355 Category II vehicles at a combined total of $1.6 billion. After the first year of production under the MRAP contract, however, Force Protection discovered that it did not have the facilities to keep up with demand. The company therefore partnered with General Dynamics Land Systems to produce its vehicle concurrently at their facilities in Detroit, Michigan, from October 2007 onward. Beginning in 2008, the Cougar vehicles were updated with an add-on protection package to counter the ever-present nuisance of the variety of IEDs. The add-on kits were the last major upgrade to the Cougar until the introduction of the independent suspension in 2009. Force Protection Buffalo Mine Removal Vehicle Category 3 MRAP Force Protection Inc.'s Buffalo Mine Removal Vehicle MRV is a 23-ton platform and the only vehicle produced under the Category 3 MRAP. Like its Category 2 cousins, the Buffalo MRV has found a multi-mission role in the War on Terror. Procurement of the Buffalo MRV predates the MRAP program. As early as 2000, the U.S. Army solicited bids for a vehicle under its Ground Stand-Off Missile Detection System GSTAMIDS program. GSTAMIDS grew out of the shift in military doctrine that followed the defense drawdown of the 1990s. As the U.S. military began participating in low-intensity conflicts, peacekeeping tours, and other contingency operations e.g. Somalia and Balkans, the need arose for a vehicle that could detect mines for route clearance and convoy operations. The initial GSTAMIDS entries included the Meerkat MDV and Husky MDV, both of which had been developed in South Africa. When Force Protection Inc., then known as Technical Solutions Group Inc., submitted their bid for the program, they gave the Army a design based on the Denel Mecham Lion II, a mine-protected personnel carrier that had seen extensive service in the South African Army during the latter years of apartheid. Codenamed Buffalo, the Force Protection design featured their cheetable V-shaped hull, 6 wheels, and a large, fully articulated robotic arm that could remove roadside ordnance at minimal risk to the crew. With assistance of 200x zoom camera, the crew could evaluate roadside objects via a television interface from inside the cabin. The vehicle could comfortably seat 6, with the driver and operator at the front and the 4 remaining soldiers behind them designated for observation. Enclosed within the vehicle's cabin, the crew stood nearly 12 feet from the ground and called operate a set of high-wattage searchlights during nighttime operations. The U.S. Army procured a set of 10 Buffalo MRVs in September 2002, all of which were delivered in 2003. Later that year, as the U.S. occupation of Iraq devolved into a counterinsurgency, the Pentagon placed orders for another 77 MRVs. Throughout 2004, Force Protection won more than $20 million in contracts to produce another batch of Buffaloes and deliver into theater by summer 2005. Under this arrangement, the Buffalo deployed with the 108th Engineer Battalion in the spring of 2005. Although the battalion received classroom courses on how to use the Buffalo, most of their instruction came from on-the-job training, actually conducting ground clearance missions in theory of operation. During its initial forays into Iraq, the Buffalo did a stellar job of detecting and removing these before they could detonate American convoys. By 2006, the Marine Corps Systems Command had jumped on board with negotiations for the delivery of at least 82 vehicles. When General D.J. Hedgelick issued his appeal for the MRAP program, Force Protection Inc. delivered the Buffalo on the coattails of the already popular Cougar vehicle. The Buffalo had already been serving in Iraq and Afghanistan by the time the MRAP program went underway, but the newfound demand for a mine-resistant vehicle created a significant windfall for Force Protection Inc. And its new $3.8 million contract, Force Protection delivered for Buffalo Marine Corps Systems Command. This represented the first contract issued to the Marines for a Buffalo vehicle. Previously, the Buffalo had been delivered exclusively to the Army. Although Force Protection came out a winner in the MRAP competition, its dealings with the Army and Marine Corps were occasionally beset by bureaucratic friction. After nearly 3 years of producing the Cougar and Buffalo, the DoD Inspector General's office issued a report stating that the Army and Marine Corps had violated contractual etiquette by continuing to award contracts to Force Protection Inc. According to the Inspector General's report, both branches had relied on Force Protection Inc. even though the company did not perform as a responsible contractor and repeatedly failed to meet contractual delivery schedules for getting vehicles to the theater. Additionally, the Army and Marine Corps' business practices with Force Protection were said to have possibly limited the government's ability to ensure it paid fair and reasonable prices. Business practices and theoretical contact etiquette aside, the Buffalo performed remarkably well in the War on Terror. With success of the vehicle, Army and Marine Corps representative assumed placing orders until 2008 and, by the end of that year, the U.S. military had over 200 MRVs in service.